Welcome back to another episode of Cyclone InCYders. Matt Van Winkle joined again this week by Sam Turner. He was out last week. Dean did a nice job filling in for him. And Sam, we're going to talk a bit of Iowa State football. We're going to recap that Oklahoma State loss. We're going to preview the Baylor game, and our Cyclone volleyball insider, Andrew Schneider, is going to come on. We're going to talk about the Iowa State volleyball team. But Sam, let's get right into this Oklahoma State loss. Another week where the Iowa State offense just looked terrible. They were not clicking. They got off on a good start again, but things started just right after the second, third, and fourth quarter. No points scored, just no consistency from the offense against Oklahoma State.
That first drive was so impressive. They came out, they had a good variation in their play calling, trying some new things. I mean, they really got off to a great start. But once that first quarter ended, I mean, that was it. It legitimately was it for the offense. From there, the defense really kept them in the ball game, gave them chances, but the offense had no answer yesterday.
And it didn't help that James White and Josh Lenz did not play for Iowa State yesterday. I think Josh Lenz had a quadricep injury. James White also out with an injury. So those guys probably won't be back for at least a week. I know James White, at the beginning of the week, coach said that he'd be out for at least 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 weeks. So that's looking like 1 to 2 weeks now. Josh Lenz hoping to be back next week, it looks like, but didn't really help that those two guys were out last week. You know, Josh Lenz, we've seen him make big plays in big games, and they needed the big plays against Oklahoma State because for a team like Oklahoma State that can score the ball, Iowa State really needed to answer, and they didn't do that against them on
Saturday.
Really
did. Obviously, those two guys are two huge playmakers in the passing game and in the running game. And a team like Oklahoma State, they have the top offense in the entire country, so obviously you're going to need to score points against them. And the offense just couldn't do that. There was no answer. The play calling was questionable. Barnett looked bad. Jantz came in and looked bad. A lot of people were calling for Sam Richardson, didn't see him, but who knows? Maybe it'll be this week.
Yeah, and we might be coming into another week with, we will be coming into another week with another quarterback controversy. And like you said, Jared Barnett, 19 to 39 passing, just 206 yards, and only the second time he's thrown for over 200 yards in his career. So I mean, that's not like out of the norm for Jared Barnett to not only have 200 yards, but he wasn't doing it on the ground either. And that's what something Iowa State needs to do is improve the running game. Having James White didn't help, but Chantrell Johnson, coughed the ball up one time, didn't really rush well. I think what did we say for Iowa State on the ground? 101 yards rushing. And for a team that like Iowa State, that Coach Rhodes said on Monday, he wants his team to be rushing for at least 200 yards on the ground to be successful. And they didn't even come close to that. Just did not look good. The offense was not clicking. And they just didn't look like in sync at all, and for the second week in a row, it's not promising for a team that, started the year 3-0. Had that tough loss against Kansas State last week. You thought they might come back on the road against Oklahoma State. Obviously, they were out for blood against what happened last week or last year against Oklahoma State. They wanted to get that win, and they really played like they wanted to against Iowa State.
They did. They came out and played very well. J.W. Walsh, their freshman quarterback, who actually isn't even supposed to be the starter, came in and played an unbelievable game. He looked great back there. He looked a lot better than Barnett did. And it was really disturbing, his lack of accuracy. You just don't get it. He misses wide open throws. And then also you spoke on it a little bit, that rushing. Rhodes said this week that he wanted 200 yards of rushing.
Yeah.
Well, the running backs only had 11 rushing attempts. The quarterbacks, Steele Jantz, Jared Barnett, had a total of 12 rushing attempts. So that math right there does not add up whatsoever to gaining 200 yards on the ground.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is that you need more rushing attempts. If you want to get close to 200 yards, obviously the passing game wasn't working for them. Why not go to the running game? Why not put Devondrick Neely in there? I thought he had a couple good rushes. He's probably the fastest guy on the team. Not very big, but why not put him in there for a series or two? Try to get some offensive rhythm going. It seemed like when he was in there, they're throwing him some screen passes and just not looking good. Like you said, Steele Jantz threw a pass to Devondrick Neely, and it was behind him, and Devondrick got right in his face and said, what are you doing? What are you throwing at? I like to see that out of a guy like Devondrick Neely, talking to a senior. I like that leadership from the team, and you can tell when they're struggling like this on offense that they need somebody, they need a spark or something, because after that first quarter, man, they just looked terrible.
Because you sit there and you really wonder who's going to be the guy on the offense, who's going to step up, who's going to make plays. And like you spoke on it, Devondrick Neely, his fire coming out there. Steele Jantz, his first throw just bounced it to Neely, and Neely was so angry. You could see it. It was visible that he wanted to be out there to make plays. And if you have to see like a one bright spot from this game, it would be Neely or Quentin Bundridge, a wide receiver. Both of those young guys getting some time, and they look good out there. But other than that, man, there's not very many bright spots from this game.
Yeah, it was nice to see Quentin Bundridge get a few nice receptions in there, especially with Josh Lenz being out. I think that's probably the reason they targeted him more was because Josh Lenz was not there, going to him a few times deep, had a couple nice big receptions, but they really just need offensive production all around. I think when Iowa State is producing well, they're playing well at quarterback. They're throwing the ball well, not great, but well enough to win the game. They've got a solid rushing attack with James White and Chantrell Johnson. Obviously, not having James White in there kills that. But that's not to say that Devondrick Neely can't go in there and fill in for James White, because they're very similar running backs in a sense that they're very quick from left to right. Laterally they're very quick up and down the field. And then from receivers, we really didn't see a whole lot. I mean, Aaron Horn, 8 receptions. He's been kind of the guy lately. Against Kansas State, he kind of broke out, had a few nice catches, but all around, really, you didn't see a whole lot of big production from Iowa State. On the other hand, when you saw Oklahoma State stats, when they have 600 yards of offense. That's what you need in the Big 12 to win. And I think we'll talk about this in the next segment with Baylor coming into town. That's a team that puts up offensive numbers. And if Iowa State wants to be able to compete in the Big 12, they're going to need to do the same thing.
Well, you spoke on it, too. It's not like the offense is predicated on Barnett putting up huge numbers. You said just the second game where he's thrown for over 200 yards, and he has a lot of wins under his belt. They don't expect him to do that much, but they expect him to manage the game, complete at least 50% of your passes. That's not even that. That's not asking that much at all. That's, in hindsight, that's not even a good number. You should be completing well over 60%. He hasn't even got to 50% in these last 2 games. But like we keep saying, the lack of the running game is really a head scratcher, because Rhodes says he wants 200 yards of rushing each week, and that's what they need to win. But the running backs are only getting 11 attempts. It does not add up to success.
And the quarterback, to me, is the big thing, is the big key here, because they're really the leaders of the team. And, Jared Barnett last year as a freshman he had no Big 12 experience, and neither did Steele Jantz for that matter, but, he's a junior transfer. But, when you look at guys like J.W. Walsh, who's a freshman, that's a guy that you want leading your team because he's got confidence out there. When I saw Jared Barnett out there yesterday, he had no confidence in that second quarter. That first quarter, when Iowa State was leading going into the second quarter, they looked good. They looked like they were a team that was ready to come out. We wanted to see them have a good first quarter. They did that. But from there on out, once the incompletions were there, looking at third down conversions, 4 of 17 on the day, that does not help your offense at all. That does not give them any room to improve, and it doesn't help the defense at all because they're out there just as much. So.
Obviously, we're talking terribly about the passing game, the running game, but the offensive line, they weren't there either.
Yep.
And that has a lot to do with it, because Barnett, obviously, if he's running for his life all game long, he's not going to be able to set his feet and throw those good passes. You can always see when he misses, his feet aren't set, he's throwing off his back foot, he gets those happy feet, he's feeling really jittery back there. So the offensive line, that has a lot to do with the lack of success through the air and on the ground.
Yeah, and that's something I did have written down. The O-line really struggling. But the defense for Oklahoma State was putting great pressure on him, really forcing him to throw the ball, and that led to those balls on the ground, balls being overthrown. Just didn't. I think once they realized in the first quarter what Iowa State's offensive attack was, they really started playing good man-to-man pressure, really good zone too. They really figured out what Iowa State was trying to do, and that's when Courtney Messingham, as an offensive coordinator, needs to say, okay, they're figuring us out now. We need to change things up a little bit, and they didn't do that, and that's something that Iowa State needs to figure out, especially playing these big defenses in the Big 12 coming up.
Well, that's a great point. There's no variation. There's nothing new in the play calling. And whenever you see something new, it always works. Like the first play of the game, little play action play, roll out to the right, and you hit the guy on the deep post. And it was right there. And another example would be that option play with Jeff Woody. Nobody's expecting that, but it worked multiple times.
And against Kansas State, same play, identical. So, I mean, I like what you're saying. I think they need more of the big plays. They need, and not having Josh Lenz, the guy that's that big player who was against TCU at least, not having him didn't help that at all. But there were opportunities in this game for Iowa State to make those big plays, and they didn't make them when they needed to. There were big chances, some deep balls that were just overthrown. And when you're this far into the season, you got to be making those plays, especially if you want to win in the Big 12.
Well, you wonder because Barnett came in that very first game and he looked good. He was hitting his throws. He threw an interception there against TCU, but he was doing what he needed to do in order for the team to win. And since that game, he just hasn't been there. He's been missing a ton of his throws, nearly throwing multiple interceptions in all the games, and his production, his confidence level, you can tell, is just not there.
And let's switch to the other side of the ball, the defense. I thought they played a pretty good game. They did enough to keep Iowa State in the game till the third quarter. There was only a 2-score game. Iowa State fans were like really down on this team going into the third quarter. But they were only down 2 scores. They were right in this game. You know, I look at the defense. If I forget who it was. I think it was Dion Broomfield had a chance for a pick six in that game. If Iowa State gets that pick six, they're down 1 score. And they had 2 of those, I think, in the game where they could have taken the ball all the way back or at least forced a couple more turnovers. Iowa State could be right in this game, and I think that speaks a lot to how the defense played against a good offense. You know, they held them under their average, 31 points. I think they were averaging something around 44, 40 points a game. So that's a good accomplishment from the defense, but still, when you're allowing 31 points against a team and you're not putting up offensive numbers, that's not going to help you much.
Yeah, it was Jacquez Washington who had the
near
pick six. He had the ball in his arm and he just let it go. But you're right, Dion had one as well. And Dion also had that strip, and he ran it back. And that was
in the red zone,
too. Exactly, to prevent an Oklahoma State score. So, in actuality, the defense did play pretty well in this ball game. Obviously gave up a ton of yards.
Yeah.
But they kept Oklahoma State well under their point total, did what they needed to do, but it was just the offense that couldn't produce.
Yeah, and they've got another big test coming up this week against Baylor. We're going to get into that in the next segment. Talk a little bit about the Baylor game coming up on Saturday. It's a homecoming game for Iowa State, back at home at Jack Trice Stadium. We'll talk about that game next. You're watching Cyclone InCYders.
And for that homecoming game, we get to entertain the number 1 passing offense in the country, number 3 total offense in the country, number 3 scoring offense in the country. All great challenges that should keep our focus, certainly defensively, as we enter into this week.
We're going to go about practice the way we go about practice, and we're going to play with everybody like we did in training camp, like we did in spring ball, like we've done throughout the season. We're going to play with everybody, with the 1s, 2s, whoever gets rotated in. So, us doing our job as a running back, as a guard, as a wide receiver, it doesn't change what your job is. It just changes what his job is, or who's doing the quarterback's job. So it really doesn't change the attitude of the other surrounding cast, because you focus on doing what you need to do and getting better at what you need to do.
We just got to execute our plays, execute it to the fullest. There's really no fingers to point. No one's doing this, no one's doing that. The whole team collective is making like bad mistakes and making mistakes that hurt us in the long run. So we just got to stop making less mistakes and just run the ball, throw the ball, do our offense, and we'll be pretty good.
When you got a wide open system like they got, you can fill in a guy that he can throw just as good, I feel, and you can keep rolling down the road and act like nothing happened. They got good play calling, and they still got some great receivers. So I feel like it's not much of a fall off from where they were last year.
Welcome back to Cyclone InCYders. Matt Van Winkle and Sam Turner. We're going to stick with football here and talk about this big game coming up for Iowa State against Baylor. This year they're not ranked. Last year when Iowa State went down to Waco, Baylor was a 25th ranked team in the country, led by RG3, who obviously went on to win the Heisman. But this year, when they lose RG3, the offensive production has not gone anywhere. The defense, on the other hand, is quite a different story. Baylor, among the tops in the Big 12, if not the country, in offensive production, among the worst in defense. So, Sam, what can you tell us about this Baylor team? Kind of a strange team.
They are a very interesting team because, like you said, tops in offense in the country and literally the bottom in defense in the country. So the team is able to put up a ton of points, but just can't stop anybody. And we've seen in the last few weeks those teams that aren't able to play any defense. Perfect example is West Virginia. Everybody thought they were the top teams. Geno was the Heisman frontrunner, but they haven't been able to play any defense, and they've got blown out their last 2 games. Baylor starts the season 3-0, and they've lost their last 3. So you can't play defense, you're probably not going to win many games.
I'm going to go off on a quick sidebar. Do you think that now with teams like Baylor and West Virginia, do you think that the Big 12 is really just becoming more of an offensive league? Is the defensive production not there anymore?
It's not as good as it should
Okay.
be or that it has been in the past.
Yeah.
Obviously, the best defenses in the country belong to those SEC teams.
Right.
You got teams like Kansas State and Iowa State that really still focus on
Mm-hmm.
the defense production.
Yeah.
But then, on the other hand, you see Baylor and West Virginia that really play no defense.
And I think that's when it's fun to see teams from the Big 12 go down to and play SEC teams, because those are always fun games. But Iowa State's defense this year is one of the best in the country. They're holding teams, some of the top teams in the nation down, like TCU. They're putting up great numbers. They hold them, to like 17 points. So that in itself excites me for this game coming up on Saturday. This Baylor team is averaging 48 points per game, which is the third most in the country right now, putting up 390 passing yards, which is just unbelievable. And they're led by Nick Florence, who's a guy that already has over 2,000 passing yards on the season, 20 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. This guy can really, really throw the ball. Wide receiver Terrence Williams has got over 1,000 yards receiving, 9 touchdowns on the year. So that's the guy. Those are the two guys you're going to want to watch out for in offense. Also have a pretty good rushing attack. Jared Salubi, 400 yards rushing, and Glasgow Martin with 6 touchdowns. So two of those guys kind of carrying the offensive load. So this offense is going to be fun to watch, but it's going to be a good test for the Iowa State defense.
They are very, very complete on offense. Nick Florence leads the Big 12 in total offense and passing offense. Wide receiver Terrence Williams, who's one of the best receiver prospects in the country, leads the conference in receiving yards per game. And like you said, Jared Salubi, another very good running back. I mean, all over the place, this Baylor team is solid on offense. But like we keep saying, they can't play any defense.
Yeah, and this Baylor team is 3-3 coming into the year. They're riding 3 straight losses, though. 3 Big 12 losses, too, and coming off a tough loss this last week against Texas, 56-50 shootout. So that kind of shows you what the Texas defense is allowing, too. Allowing 50 points is, wow, that's unbelievable, because, like we were saying, these Big 12 defenses, they should be playing well, but when you're getting teams like West Virginia and teams like Baylor in there now, these guys are just putting great offensive numbers up.
I know. It's
crazy.
honestly, man, it's funny because these defenses are so bad. And if you want to compare a common opponent, they played TCU 2 weeks ago, and TCU blew them out, 49-21. And in that game, that was Boykin's second game, as you remember, with Paul Hall out in that game against Iowa State. Boykin came in, didn't play great, but Boykin had a huge game against this Baylor defense. 4 touchdowns, his first victory as a starter. So looking at the common opponent there, TCU really took care of Baylor easily.
This is a huge opportunity, I think, for this Iowa State team to get a big win, a much-needed win. If Iowa State wants any chance, I think, at getting to a bowl this year, I think this is a must-win game, because the season only gets tougher from this point on. And for a team like Baylor, who is among the worst in defense this year, in Big 12 games, they're -9 in turnover margin. That is huge for Iowa State if they want to get anywhere this season. If they want to get that 5th win, get off this 2-game skid. I think this is a huge game for Iowa State to win.
I agree 100%. I think if the Cyclones want to go to a bowl game, they really, really need to win this game.
Biggest game of the year this season, do you think?
Up to this point,
Okay,
yes,
up to
because
this point.
obviously the goal is getting to that bowl game. They're going to need this win. Looking forward, they got Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, and close out with West Virginia. So you look at the Baylor game and you look at the Kansas game as the 2 most winnable games left on the schedule. The Cyclones need to win those 2 games.
Yeah, maybe not the biggest game. I think maybe you look back at Kansas State. That was a big opportunity for Iowa State to move up in the rankings, beat a top 10 team, a top 5 team in Kansas State. But I think this is the game that they most need a win. They're in the most need of a win this week, I think, because looking at the team on offense these past 2 weeks against Kansas State and last week, I think they just really need to get something going. And when you look at what Iowa State has done this year, we've seen flashes of that offense. We've seen how good they can be. Obviously, with Steele starting the first few games for Iowa State, looked pretty good. The offensive numbers were better. His completion percentage was better. Then just starts turning the ball over and over and over. And then they go to Jared Barnett. Has a good game against TCU. Then you look what happened last week, and just the turnovers were there a little bit, but just not clicking. The completion percentage just terrible. Only 19 completions, 38 attempts, something like that. 16-36 against Kansas State. So you look at what Iowa State needs to do. I think it's just consistency on offense. If they can string plays together, have a good first quarter, and just keep that going, like what we said last week, they had the first quarter scoring 10 points.
Yep.
and then they go on to score no points. And I think that we just need to see that offensive production continue throughout the rest of the
Well, this
game.
is definitely a game that they can do that. Baylor, obviously, we keep saying it, absolutely awful defense. And this is a game where the Cyclones can really open things up on offense, try some new things, because, like we said in the first segment, every time they do that, they have success. And Baylor is a team that you will have success if you try new things, but they cannot be predictable. They cannot be easy to defend on offense, and that's what they've been these last few games.
And I think Jeff Woody said it best after the Oklahoma State game. He says that this team is just a hair away in each of their categories from clicking on all ends. They are just a few things missing from the offense, just a few things missing from the defense. Obviously, from the offense, you want to see that passing game improve. On the defensive end, you want to see a couple of those turnovers go Iowa State's favor. I think he's exactly right on that. I think that if they can get things going, just a few things go their way. Like against TCU, they had a couple turnovers go their way, a couple big plays go their way. I think that's a game you want to look at and what Iowa State can study from themselves and learn a lot from themselves. If they can play like they did against TCU on the road, I think they're going to have a good chance to beat a team like Baylor at home.
You're totally right, because Iowa State is the type of team that's going to be in every single game for the vast majority of it, and they were against Oklahoma State like we were talking about.
Yeah.
But it's going to take those plays on offense, a good play on defense, taking an interception or a fumble return for a touchdown, things of that nature. It's going to take a few of those plays against Baylor in order to win this ball game.
Just a momentum builder, just something on offense that can give that defense a spark. I think that's maybe what they're missing, is that teams, both sides of the ball feed off each other. When the defense has a big play, the offense goes right out there and they're pumped because they know that this defense is out there to win them a game. And the same goes for the defense playing again in the offense, because if the defense goes out there, gets a big turnover, that offense goes right out there and they're pumped because they know that they're in a good spot, they're in a good position to get a touchdown, and they've got that team on the other end. That they're pressured to get a touchdown too. So I think when you look at it, Iowa State just needs to be better overall. There's not one area you look at and say Iowa State needs to improve here. I think it's everywhere Iowa State needs to improve. The one in particular is the quarterback position, which is on the hot seat again. And let's move to that, Sam. Jared Barnett started the game last week against Oklahoma State. Steele Jantz comes in the fourth quarter. A lot of people thought we might see Sam Richardson, the freshman this year, the redshirt freshman, who we saw play against, was it Western Illinois this year, had one drive, leads Iowa State to a touchdown. Didn't throw the ball. More rushing attempts. I think Devondre Neely had a lot of carries in that possession, but I think a lot of people wanted to see Sam Richardson because we've seen Steele Jantz this year. We know what he can do. We know how he struggles out there. He doesn't, just doesn't have a lot of energy for Iowa State when he's out there. I think guys wanted to see Sam Richardson get there against Oklahoma State. What about you?
I mean, honestly, you couldn't do any worse than they were already at, so why not throw Richardson in there? A lot of people are very excited about his potential. There's been a lot of really great things been said about him as a quarterback. I mean, at that point in the game, why not throw him in? Because there was literally, you couldn't do any worse than they had been doing on offense. So in that specific situation, I think Richardson could have easily gone in there, and hey, who knows what would have happened. But I'm not so sure against Baylor.
And, you and I, Sam, aren't at practice. We don't know what goes on behind closed doors. But from what we've heard about Sam Richardson and from what we've heard from the coaches is that they really like this guy. They like what they see out of him. He can throw the ball. He's got probably one of the best arms on the team right now. And for a team that needs those big plays down the field, why not give him a shot? I really wanted to see him out there. I was sad when we saw him against Western Illinois because he didn't throw the ball much, but I really wanted to see him against Oklahoma State to see what he could do. We were talking off the air, though, that probably the reason they're not putting him out there is because the coaches see something in Sam Richardson that they don't quite like. They don't think he's quite ready for Big 12 play. But I think, in my opinion, I think that Sam Richardson could possibly get a shot if Iowa State's struggling against Baylor, which I think is going to be hard to do because Iowa State, if they're just playing average offense against Baylor and they're playing good defense, they're going to be right in this game. But so we might see Sam Richardson this week, but we heard from Coach after the Oklahoma State game. All three quarterbacks going into Monday had a chance to start that game. Coach didn't tell the media that it was a quarterback quarterback competition, that coming into this week. Nobody knew that except for the team. So I think that, and Coach said after the game, it's going to be another week similar to last week where he doesn't know who's going to be starting on Saturday. It could be a game time decision. We talked to Jared Barnett last week, and he said Coach told him Friday, so he knew like a day in advance, but still, Is this healthy for an offense to not know who's going to be the quarterback, though?
No, it's flat out terrible for it to be such a question mark.
Yeah.
Who's going to start for them, because each quarterback has their own tendencies, and based off those tendencies, certain players or certain nuances about everybody on the offense change, and they need the offensive line blocks differently. The receivers run routes differently. They're expecting the ball at different times. All of those little things come into play when you're going between two quarterbacks, and that is not healthy at all for the offense. I love the saying, if you have two quarterbacks, you got none, because I don't think that could be any truer. In situations where there's two quarterbacks, there's that quarterback competition, it never seams like it's good for the offense. You never say, oh, that offense is doing well because they have two quarterbacks.
But at the same time, it's nice for Iowa State to have two guys that can win Big 12 games. You know that they can go out there and win. But, yeah, like you're saying, at the same time, you don't have a guy going out there consistently at the same time, kind of going out there and producing for you. So it's kind of a good thing, but it's also kind of a bad thing. So I want your opinion, Sam. If you're Coach Rhodes this week, we filmed this show on Sunday, so we don't really know what's going to be unfolding throughout the week. But who do you think is going to be the starter against Baylor?
I really think he's going to stick with Barnett.
Okay.
I think Barnett has to be the guy. You saw it in that TCU game. He was able to come in there and take control of the game. He really takes control of the team. He has a calming effect on the team. It seems like all the offensive players seem to play better when he's in at quarterback, because they seem to know what to expect more rather than when Steele Jantz comes in. The way Jantz has come in, and he just looks so unprepared, particularly against Oklahoma State. He looks like he's just not ready to come in anytime, and it's a huge question mark because it's a guy that has had experience in the past in big games. But when he comes off the bench, he just looks unprepared. Based off that, I think they need to go with Barnett. I think you got to stick with them. The offensive line, though, has got to play better, because I think if they play better, Barnett will play better.
And based on what I saw from Steele last week, I might have to agree with you there. I'm kind of back and forth on this, though, if they do start Steele or Jared. I think I'm going to agree with you, though. I think what I heard from you is exactly right. I think Barnett can go in there. We've seen him be able to lead the team. We've seen him be able to do good things. I think where they're going to go with Jared, but I don't know if he's going to be on a short leash. He wasn't on a short leash apparently against Oklahoma State. They really had faith in him, so I think they stick with him. I think you're right, but it's going to come down to this week. We don't know what happens in practice. I think really anything can happen in this game. So quickly, Sam, who's going to win this game, Iowa State or Baylor?
I'm going to go with Iowa State.
Okay.
I've been against Iowa State the last few weeks, and I've been correct. Okay. But I think this is a perfect opportunity for Iowa State to bounce back against a team that doesn't play any defense. And like I keep saying, when you don't play defense, you are very, very vulnerable in games like this. I think this is a game that Iowa State needs to win. Homecoming week, I think Iowa State pulls out the victory. I
think you hit it on the head. I'm going to go Iowa State too. This is a really dangerous offense, though. I think if Baylor gets, I think if they score, I'm going to say if they go out and score, if Baylor scores 3 touchdowns in the first quarter, I think Iowa State loses this game. If that defense can step it up, hold them to within 2 touchdowns or fewer, I think Iowa State wins this game. They're going to need that offensive production, though. They're going to need it early. They're going to need it throughout every quarter of this game. I think it does. I think it's going to come down to a similar game that like Baylor had last week against Texas. I don't think it's a shootout quite that. I think it's going to be probably in the 30s. I think this is going to be maybe a 34-30 game. Iowa State is going to come out on top and win this game. It's going to be a good one, though, Sam. 6 p.m. on Fox Sports Net. We hope you'll watch that game and join us next week. But coming up after this segment, we're going to talk some Iowa State volleyball with our volleyball insider, Andrew Schneider, coming up after this. You're watching Cyclone InCYders.